Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. We are skipping the usual agenda today because we're jumping right into how one of history's absolute most famous disasters actually gave birth to modern maritime law. We're going to look at the Titanic not just as a tragic accident, but as a compounding, massive series of systemic failures that ultimately changed ocean travel forever through the creation of SOLAS.
Okay, let's dive into this because the whole story really starts with some supreme corporate hubris. The vice president of the White Star Line was so incredibly confident in his brand new vessel that he proudly declared to the public, "This ship is unsinkable." And you know, that single arrogant claim is what instilled this deadly, totally false sense of security right from day one.
And they spared absolutely no expense to back up that prestige either. If you adjust it for inflation, this ship cost a staggering $400 million to build in today's money. It was basically a floating five-star hotel. We're talking a heated swimming pool, Turkish baths, grand staircases, the whole shebang.
Section 1. The unsinkable illusion.
So the ship's highly publicized safety features included this double-bottomed hull and 16 watertight compartments. And honestly, the math seemed completely foolproof to them. They figured even with 4 flooded compartments, the ship would sail comfortably. But here is the tragic irony of it all. The Iceberg didn't hit the double bottom. It struck the single-layered side, breaching 6 compartments. In an instant, that entire unsinkable illusion was just shattered.
Section 2. A cascade of fatal errors.
You see, the collision was practically engineered by corporate pressure. On that perfectly moonless night, the ship received 7 different ice warnings, all of which were catastrophically ignored. Why? Well, White Star Line chairman Joseph Bruce Collier allegedly hit a 2 p.m. warning to make sure the ship maintained this crazy dangerous speed of 21.5 knots. That's about 40 kilometers an hour. He was pushing for a 6-day Atlantic crossing record, driving them straight into a low-visibility ice field.
Which brings us to Section 3. The physics of sinking.
When the collision finally happened, they didn't just bump into a little block of ice. They hit an unstoppable geological force of nature. This specific iceberg weighed an estimated 1.5 million tons, and it was roughly the size of an entire football field.
Now you might be wondering, how can ice actually tear through thick metal like that? Well, to put that into perspective, scale an ice cube up to a 1.5 million ton mountain that matches the height of the ship's crow's nest, and the physics become totally unforgiving. For 10 agonizing seconds, this massive object scraped the bow, popping rivets and tearing holes as easily as a metal car wrapping around a solid wooden tree.
Let's just walk chronologically through how rapidly this whole nightmare played out. At 11:39 p.m., lookout Frederick Fleet spots the iceberg. Just 1 single minute later, the collision happens. By midnight, a completely shocked Captain Smith is ordering distress calls. By 12:20 a.m., they manage to reach the Carpathia, but it's 107 kilometers away, meaning it's 3.5 hours out. And exactly 2 hours after that signal, the massive ship breaks in two and vanishes completely.
And this brilliantly illustrates the really tragic human element of the story. When the alarm first sounded, First Officer William ordered the ship to steer left. But down at the wheel, steersman Robert Hitchens totally panicked. He misunderstood the command in the heat of the moment and accidentally steered right, directly toward the iceberg. By the time he realized his mistake, it was just far too late.
Section 4. The fatal lifeboat math.
This right here is where we hit pure mathematical terror. There were around 2,200 people on board the ship, but because lifeboats were deemed quote-unquote unnecessary for an unsinkable ship, they only carried 20 of them, which could hold just 1,200 people total. Meaning, even if they had a completely flawless, perfect evacuation, 1,000 human beings were mathematically doomed the exact moment the ship left the port.
And, as we all know, the evacuation was very far from perfect. That unsinkable marketing, it actually worked a little too well. Passengers genuinely believed the massive ship was safer than those tiny little wooden boats. Because of that, the very first lifeboat, which was designed to hold 65 people, was lowered down into the dark ocean with only 28 people inside of it.
So by the time the final lifeboat was lowered, 1,500 people were still trapped on board. When the ship finally plunged, those who could swim faced the lethal reality. The Atlantic Ocean was -2 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, severe hypothermia kills within mere minutes.
Perhaps the most frustrating detail of this entire disaster is the SS Californian. Unbelievably, it was just 37 kilometers away. It was literally close enough for the Titanic passengers to see its lights on the horizon. But their radio operator had turned off the radio for the night at 11:15 p.m. And when the Californians' crew physically saw the Titanic's distress rockets, Captain Stanley Lord shockingly dismissed them as party fireworks. Hundreds of lives could have been saved if they had just responded.
When the British inquiry looked into this, they didn't just point fingers at bad luck with ice. Actually, they found a massive, systemic failure across the board. Corporate overconfidence led directly to a severe lack of lifeboats. Captain Smith had actually canceled a scheduled safety drill on the very day of the collision. Add in a panicking steersman and all those ignored warnings just to hit a top speed, and it was the perfect recipe for a catastrophe.
Section 5. The birth of solace.
The sinking of the Titanic was a profound global shock, and it absolutely necessitated an immediate international response. So, what does this all mean for us today? Well, this brings us to SOLACE, the safety of life at sea. Born directly out of the wreckage, SOLACE is the international treaty that completely rewrote the rulebook of maritime law, effectively ensuring a localized failure could never again result in a mass casualty event of this scale.
SOLACE systematically dismantled literally every single failure we've discussed today, fundamentally changing how humans travel the oceans forever. In 1914, the International Ice Patrol was created to constantly monitor and alert ships about icebergs. SOLACE also laid down a hard, unbendable law. Ships absolutely must carry enough lifeboats for every single passenger on board, no exceptions. And to solve the tragedy of the sleeping radio operator on the Californian, strict rules now mandate 24/7 radio monitoring for all passenger ships.
As for the ship itself, well, it lay lost in the darkness for decades, until the American ocean explorer Robert Ballard finally discovered the wreckage in 1985, sitting at 3,800 meters deep. But, it won't actually be there forever. Deep-sea bacteria are aggressively eating away at its metal framework, and experts currently expect the physical ship to completely disintegrate by the year 2030.
Yet even as the ship fades, our cultural fascination refuses to sink. Back in 2012, a billionaire announced Titanic 2, which was supposed to be an exact replica meant to sail the exact same route. The project kind of stalled out, partly because a true replica obviously lacks modern amenities like Wi-Fi and TVs. But it leaves us with a really provocative question to think about. With billionaires trying to literally rebuild the past, are we still totally obsessed with this era of unbridled hubris? Or, thanks to SOLACE, have we finally internalized the deadly lessons of the unsinkable ship? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. And hey, keep questioning the world around you.